Sorry. Go ahead.
Forgot about that part. Uh, For this session, we're going to talk about cultural humility. Children need to feel supported and staying connected with people or places and things that they care about, while also helping them to adjust to what is currently happening in their lives. The children you parent may come from a different background or culture than yours. This will require parents who foster to be extra mindful of when the child needs support. For example, their peers may see them as different, and that you may end up being bullied for the way they look, for the way they speak, for sexual orientation. So being there to offer your support for that youth. In this, we're going to be, this section focuses on having self-awareness, being able to have self-reflection, appreciation for diversity, other worldviews, and having adaptability and flexibility. What is
I'm just messing with you, Michelle. Keep you on your toes. How are identity and culture connected?
Wait a minute. So a person's identity evolves throughout their life. It doesn't stay stagnant. It's ever changing, and it can be influenced by family members. It can be influenced by other people around them. It could be influenced by their community. So it is it shifts, and part of our job as a parent is to be able to reinforce their identity, their self-worth. But what is identity? Again, identity shapes who we are as a person. It begins to form very early in life. It's something that we see even with young children. One of the things that they learn is, oh, I'm a boy, you're a girl, things like that. Or another child's skin tone. Identity continues to explore and broaden over time. And again, especially during the teen years. A big part of our identity comes from people who are connected to us biologically, emotionally, and just from our life experience. Again, it's influences, and it does change. What forms our identity? Sometimes it's the name that we're given. Sometimes we're given the story about our name and how it's passed down from generation to generation. Family members share stories, that young person may not have experienced those situations, but because they hear it from other family members, they feel part of that experience. Having their family values. There's the sexual orientation and how they identify. There is a section in the manual that has a list and kind of a description of the different sexual identities. I want to say there's oh my goodness, transgender, there's
Well, I can't remember all the letters right now, but LGBTQIA.
thank you.
And it goes through all the letters, but we know that this is also something that's always evolving as, we gain more knowledge and more experience with that. So it's always good to keep yourself abreast of all those different things that our young people may be encountering and what they may have been talking about with their friends as well.
So the impact of experiences and the message on identity. Again, a big part of our identity is developed through experiences or messages that we receive, things that are told to us, Again, we may not have experienced it personally, but the stories have been shared, passed on to us, and we become part of that. Those stories and sometimes the messages that the youth receive potentially can be, can be positive, but as well as negative. The stories that are shared and get kind of passed on, the generational stories, again, being part of that without necessarily experiencing it. Though the messages on identity can be subtle, it can change, it can, it's subtle as well as obvious. It can change over time, or situation is, it could be a one-time situation, but they carry that with them.
And it's also important to highlight what Michelle was talking about when we were talking about generational trauma and historical trauma. When we talk about the life experiences for minorities in this country, and what people have experienced, and socioeconomic issues that impact people as well, and being able to make sure that we're aware of that and we're having open discussions around that as well for our young people.
Culture surrounds us all the time. The values, beliefs, systems of language, communication, and practice that people share in common that can be used to define them as a collective. Again, we have shared cultural experiences. Those sometimes those traditions, those life celebrations, like the quinceañera or a sweet 16, starting a new job, being able, having graduated, then that milestone that gets reached where the person is now able to drive. It's like, woohoo, they gain that sense of independence and they feel proud of themselves. There's but Buzz, I'm saying it
Bar
wrong.
mitzvahs.
Thank you. So they're all celebrating different different milestones, but that youth starts to feel proud about themselves, feeling that independence, and being able to continue on. And sometimes, when the youth are with other peers, they may get asked questions about, oh, what is that? And sometimes it can be meant negative, that they may be, when they're being asked these questions, it could, sometimes it could have a negative connotation to it.
Absolutely. And just also remembering like those shared cultural experiences that you can talk about, the customs, the traditions, family, how families operate, the food, language, music, arts, all those things encompass cultural experiences. And so it's just important to be able to highlight those things and be able to talk to our youth about what are their cultural experiences too, if they don't share the same culture as us.
How about putting on the music in the background and all of a sudden you see a whole crew come in?
Exactly. So the isms, right? We have to talk about classism, power imbalances, racism, discrimination, heterosexism. These are all the isms. We talk about the views and actions of others that can have a negative impact. It's important to be aware of the ways the children you'll be caring for and their families might have experienced forces that have negatively impacted their identity. Things like all the things listed on the screen: classism, racism, heterosexism, discrimination, power, and privilege differences may have affected their lives in negative ways. Often children who are in foster care have experienced many of these isms, given the stigma and powerlessness that happens along this journey. So it's really important to think about ways that we can support the children who have spent time in foster care, or with multiple caregivers, and recognize that they have been bombarded by a slew of isms, and just being able to work with them on understanding the weight of that pressure and what they're feeling, and being able to support them as best as possible. As Michelle talked about earlier too, especially the ism around sexual orientation and identity is such a hot topic for a lot of our kids nowadays,
Yeah.
that it's something just to be mindful of because they're already getting so much at them from all the different angles, school and the community and stuff. Just being able to acknowledge, address, and support them as best as possible with through communication. Anything else
Can,
you want to add with that, Michelle?
No, you hit it.
can I get an example for power imbalances?
So when we talk about for our kids that when we're looking at socioeconomics, and how that plays out, there are some power imbalances that take place there. And when we talk about our kids that are already feeling very powerless in the foster care and child welfare system, they don't get decisions making. They don't have their voice often heard. And so we want to make sure that we're always asking the questions and allowing for opportunity for our kids to have their voice heard and be a voice at the table. So we're advocating for them. And it's not everyone else around them making decisions all the time for them as the child, but also hearing their input.
For cultural connections and being able to tip that scale, you know, with the youth is helping that youth or teenager feel a sense of pride and belonging, connecting them to their culture of origin or cultures that they feel that they belong to. When we do or say, well, we don't say anything about the child or the teen's culture, we wanna be able to create where when they encounter all the isms, the racism, the discrimination, heterosexism, and all of that, we wanna be able to counterbalance it, and we wanna be able to help the youth, so that way it doesn't impact the youth so much. And so we want the child to feel pride about themselves, to be able to belong, to have connections and help them get an understanding and some clarity as to what's happening in order to empower them.
Yep. And empower them and also help increase their self-esteem as well.
Mhm.
And I always reflect back on this of like, and I don't know how familiar you guys are with this, so bear with me if you're not as familiar with it. But in New York City, every June, there's the Puerto Rican Pride Parade, right? And there are so many youth that participate and attend this pride and are just like, yes, Puerto Rico. And they're like with the flags and the music and enjoying that. And it's part of their culture. Some of these youth may have never been to the island. They may not speak Spanish, but there is that cultural connection that is very deep and strong, and it helps with their self-esteem and feeling that connection to their culture, to their ancestors, to their parents, and for whatever reason. So we want to make sure that we're always allowing for these connections to take place so that we can feel that pride in ourselves and our self-worth, as well as our community and that connection.
For cultural responsiveness is learning from another and acting respectfully. Having cultural competence, being able to effectively interact with people from other cultures. And cultural humility. I have to move my boxes over.
Oh, I'll read it. A humble and respectful attitude towards individuals of other cultures that pushes one to challenge their own cultural biases, realize they cannot possibly know everything about other cultures, and approach learning about other cultures as a lifelong process. Experiences and expectations, right? So when a new family comes together, it's not unusual for there to be cultural misunderstandings if they come from different cultural backgrounds and experiences. Misunderstandings can happen because our cultural understanding of the way things should be is a byproduct of our experiences, whether we realize it or not. The culture that surrounds us shaped and continues to shape our view and expectations about so many things. So we know sometimes there are natural like biases that happen, or we know stereotypes that happen. And so we just want to be aware of that and how that's impacting our own worldview when we're working with children that are in our home that may not share the same cultural and background as ourselves, so that we're having those open and transparent discussions and we're trying to learn more. I think it was Doreen who had said earlier, like, if I don't know something, I'm gonna Google it and look it up and say, okay, let's do this together. Or Sam, you had talked about also like, hey, maybe we'll go to a restaurant and have try the different foods and see what's out there, right? And it's having that open mind to say like, hey, I'm gonna learn more about this. Like I may not know about it, but let's work together on learning more about it and having more exposure. What does this image bring up for you? What do you think about this?
My favorite holiday.
6 months away.
Yep.
Michelle, stop the stress.
Yeah, that was my favorite holiday when I was younger. Now it's not my favorite holiday because I spend too much money.
'Cause now you're responsible for it all.
Yeah. Mhm.
Mhm.
It's pagan holiday. It's still my favorite holiday.
Right. And so we have to think about what does this mean for our kids too, right? They may have holidays and traditions that they're used to, ways that their family celebrated. And while not everyone celebrates Christmas, there's always holidays or special occasions that every family celebrates in some fashion. And so being responsive to that and learning more about it and having an open mind to ask questions like, how did you guys celebrate Christmas? Are you okay with being able to have presents? Are you okay with church? Or, those different kind of questions, or what kind of foods do you usually eat? These are all things that we think about and we sometimes take for granted around the holidays, because what is normative for us and how we celebrate and create memories with our family may not be the same for every family. And in different cultures, there are different ways to celebrate the holidays as well. I, for one, will say growing up, Christmas Eve was the party time. Like we were celebrating on Christmas Eve. Christmas Day was all about just being lazy or going to the movies or playing with whatever we got from Christmas Eve. Now, as I've gotten older and I've married into a different culture, now it's a little different how it works out and what we're actually celebrating and which day takes importance. While also teaching my children the Puerto Rican side of doing the Three Kings Day. So these are things that you start to learn while you're working with your children on how do they express themselves, how does their identity reflect on their traditions, and what's important for them. Michelle, anything else you want to add?
Just something to also kind of keep in mind too is during these family gatherings and these holidays, potentially thinking about how it could potentially affect them as far as like they may remember excuse me, sorry. They may remember at that point in time, like, oh, I miss my brother. I miss my mother, or I miss what we used to do. Or sometimes it could just be a reminder as well, like, oh, as exciting as it is to receive all these presents, I didn't necessarily get this in my home. So they may feel particular sadness over it. So just something to keep in mind if you see that the child becomes withdrawn or anything like that.
Yeah.
Ooh.
He's mad because I'm not giving him any of my food.
That little one, he had quite the bark on him.
He sounds bigger than he actually is.
As children get older, you will be able to talk more in depth about their cultures and developing identities. These conversations may not always be easy. However, you know that you can reach out to your team and we're there to support you. While the topics may get complicated and your role can be simplified into what they need from you. The main things they need from you in these talks is for you to listen, to be able to learn and understand where they're coming from. Just conversation tips from teens. And I want to say this was gathered from teens that were interviewed. And so some of their responses were staying engaged in conversations by simply listening, stay open to explorations rather than trying to guide them. Listen for understanding rather than to support your own conclusions. Look at what the child is doing right in the situation, not what's wrong with them or it. Engage and affirm rather than trying to fix or change. Tolerate some degree of discomfort when you're deeply listening, and accept not having closure after a conversation. Just kind of let it stir, kind of sit.
That
Marinate.
last one,
Mm.
accept not having closure, right? Because as adults and parents, we want to problem solve and be like, we got a cute little bow in a box and we're done here. But we have to be accepting of, like, sometimes we just gotta let it roll and see what happens, because it's not always gonna have that pretty bow on the box. So allying, listen carefully and keep your attitude open, be language affirming. Make sure the child's the priority. Like in one of the videos we heard earlier where the parent said, remember, where was my gaze? It was over to my child, making sure my child knows they are the priority. They are what's important, not the stranger in front of you. Acknowledge their feelings and experiences and brainstorm possible action plans. That's always the best way so that you're able to solidify that relationship and build that trust and open communication with your young person. Any questions so far about what we've talked about?